Hi, good afternoon. I'm Steve. So I am the web team lead at Tile, and then for those of you who aren't aware, we were acquired by Life360 back in January, so now I'm also team lead for Life360.com. I'm originally from the UK, but I now live out in Vancouver, so a little bit jet lagged today, but hopefully we'll be okay. So agenda. So quick run through of who or what is Tile, why did we choose to replatform, how we went about choosing a platform, the headless versus headful debate, a quick architecture overview, and then where we're at and where we see things going in the future. So for those of you who aren't aware what is Tile, this is our previous lineup, and that's our current lineup of Bluetooth trackers. So we have apps on both iOS and Android. If you've come across AirTags, we're kind of the multi-platform version of AirTags. We've been around for about 7 years. We also have Tile embedded within various hardware products. So started out, I think, with a Skullcandy product. We're now in Sennheiser, Bose, HP laptops, Lenovo laptops. There's Tile embedded in quite a lot of different hardware. And if you're within Bluetooth range, you can ring your keys or your wallet or something. If you're outside of Bluetooth range, you can see where your keys are on a map, and if you lose them, hopefully get them back again. We also offer a premium platform, and so this will be important when we get into the slides a little bit. One of the problems that we have is trying to sell hardware and subscriptions. So a lot of e-commerce platforms will let you sell either hardware or a subscription. We want to sell both. And so this is part of the reason we went down the headless route. So why did we choose to replatform? So our marketing team did a similar talk to this to internal Life360 people once we got acquired. So these are literally their words from the business of why we chose to replatform. The main one being a frictionless modern checkout. So you can see on the slides, this is our current legacy checkout experience. It's quite dated. It looks really old and gray and horrible. There's no address autocomplete. There's no Google Pay. There's no Apple Pay. It's a PHP monolith architecture, which is several versions out of date. It's really hard for us to update and maintain that. I think talking to what Christian mentioned earlier, developer loss is real. We really struggled. I've been at Tile for about 1.5 years. There are 1 or 2 people on my dev team who were there before me. Everyone else has left because they hated working on that architecture. We also wanted a platform that was more nimble. So again, one of the problems we have is that our current CMS system that our marketing team use has very little validation, has very little in terms of safety nets. It's really easy for our marketing team to go in and try and change something, forget to add a title to a hero banner, and then suddenly the site is broken. Or they're meant to set a value of 1, they set it to 2, and then again, the site just explodes. So we wanted something that reduces the QA effort of having to check what the marketing folks are doing, enable them to be more self-serving. And then the standard things of why we moved to headless, performance and accessibility. So accessibility is a big thing nowadays. A lot of companies are getting hit with lawsuits. We wanted full control over that rather than giving it out to a platform. And same with performance. And then, yeah, I've put on the bottom, legacy PHP architecture is just horrific to work with. So this is our old website's Lighthouse score, just on one page. It's not the worst, but it's not great. We can definitely do better. So how did we go about choosing a platform? So I've been at Tile for, like I say, October 2020, about 1.5 years now. When I joined, our previous product manager was starting to look at various platforms. We evaluated a number of platforms, both from a business point of view and a developer point of view, trying to find something that both works and does what it says in the tin. You'd be surprised how many platforms are out there that the API docs say one thing, and then the API result is completely different. So we wanted something that would work for both the developers and for business. So we spun up a couple of different storefronts on Shopify, BigCommerce, Kibo, there's whatever platforms. Ultimately, we settled on BigCommerce worked for us. It gave us the greatest flexibility. We thought it was a great platform that offered like GraphQL, REST APIs, all of the kind of modern infrastructure and architecture that both developers would like working with, but also gives the flexibility back to the business. So headless versus headful. So in one phrase, that's the reason we chose headless, is greater flexibility. It's really easy for us to swap in and out third parties. So if we want to swap out our review partner, it's really easy. It's a couple of lines of code. Again, this goes back to decoupling everything from a monolith architecture. We have modern JavaScript frameworks, so everything we built is a Next.js app, which, again, improves our developer experience, which we'll come back to in a little bit. We have fine-grained control of performance. So, again, without going headless, you're giving up a lot of that control to the platform that you're hosted on. If you want to specify in your HTTP2 headers that you want to send back the images for your site or preload assets for the next page, you can't do that. If you want to specify things in a service worker, you can't do that. By having everything in your own control, you can specify in as much or as little detail as you want. And again, it comes back to the previous talk. If you want to implement, I don't know, the newest video framework or the newest image format, it's on you to do that. So yeah, limitless customizability. There are obviously reasons not to do headless. I won't spend too long on this slide, but you do potentially have a longer initial development period. If you're reskinning something that already exists, obviously that's going to be quicker to get out of the door. You obviously have more code to maintain. That may mean you have security issues. That may mean that you have just more frameworks to keep up to date. And you, again, potentially have higher running costs. So you're obviously paying for the platforms that you're using, but also the AWS infrastructure or Google Compute Engine infrastructure, or in this case, Netlify. So getting started, I would say don't reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of template repos out there. Netlify has a few of them. All of the major platforms will have at least one or two repos. We went with Next.commerce, but there are many to choose from. And I would say reuse component libraries. So if you have an internal mobile app that's, let's say, a React Native app, or you have a legacy website that you already have components for, you can reuse those components in your modern JavaScript framework. You don't have to try and recreate those in another platform. So again, if you have a web app version of your site, you don't have to then try and translate those into Liquid or into Stencil or whatever other framework that your platform uses by default. And then, this isn't a sponsored talk, but we did make a lot of use out of Netlify. So that's our Netlify deployment. There are actually a few more on that slide that aren't related to e-commerce, but Netlify has definitely taken a lot of the pain out of deploying our infrastructure. We get development experience for free. It's really easy for our QA guys to jump in and kind of add notes of this thing is broken or this doesn't work how I expect. And then with background workers and functions and things, again, we get all of that infrastructure for free from Netlify. We don't have to worry about scaling it. We don't have to worry about people being on call for ops. Like, all of that is just handled for us. So from an architecture point of view, this is a really dumbed down version. I'm happy to chat to anyone this evening and go through a kind of more in-depth architecture. But from the top left, we use NetSuite as our ESP. We sync all of our inventory on a kind of 5-minute background worker in Netlify back to our PIM, which then talks to a number of BigCommerce storefronts. So I put 3 up on the slide, but in reality, we have 5 different locales. And so each one of those BigCommerce storefronts is responsible for a locale in a local currency. And again, if we wanted to swap out BigCommerce for Shopify or something similar, then that's decoupled from most of our app. It's relatively easy for us to do that. And then in the middle, we have our Next.js app. And so that is the heart of the machine. That ingests, it is one sort of standalone function. We don't have a different Next.js app for each locale. We just have one instance that manages everything. And again, because we're deployed on Netlify's high-performance edge, we don't have to worry about where the content lives. It just kind of lives for us. The orders arrow is slightly wrong here. It does jump back to BigCommerce and then back again, but for simplicity, it fires off a webhook. we listen to those webhooks, and then when an order is created, we put those back into SQS. So again, we're just decoupling everything, making sure that there's not one single point of failure. Why did we choose to go with SQS as opposed to just handling those orders natively? We found that our NetSuite instance was horrifically slow. So we would randomly find that the order would get to NetSuite, then sometimes it wouldn't get to NetSuite, and then BigCommerce would ultimately get a 504 if that request timed out, and ultimately would mark our webhook as a dead webhook. So by having SQS in there, everything flows really quickly. Everything happens within sub 1 second of that message coming from BigCommerce into SQS. It also gives us some monitoring alerting as well. So if that queue starts to backlog, we have AWS alerts on there that say, hey, your queue is getting too big, you're probably not processing it. Is NetSuite down? Is Stripe down? We can investigate. And likewise, if there are no orders going into that queue, is our site down? It's a really basic, simple level of monitoring. We obviously have more than that, but yeah, SQS is your friend. Then we have our order consumer, which just translates things from a BigCommerce order into our NetSuite order. So what about content? So again, plug and play. So we wanted to give our marketing team an easy platform for them to manage their content, and so we just dropped Contentful into our Next.js app. So within Contentful, we can specify, it's probably a bit hard to read on these slides, but we can specify both screens and modules is how we decided to break it down. So if you think of a screen as like a how it works page or about tile or the home page, each one of those will be a screen. And then each screen will have its own subset of modules. So you might have a hero banner and a featured product and a reviews tab on a home page. Each one of these can be localized within Contentful. And so within Contentful, we can also specify validation rules and start to limit the mistakes that the marketing team could make. So for example, if our code requires a title within the hero image, within the hero banner, we can specify that in Contentful, and they genuinely can't save that model without that title, and starts to reduce the QA effort that is required when making changes. And again, that goes back to the earlier point of making our site more nimble. The marketing team are more self-serving. So talking about subscriptions. So I said before, it's hard to find a platform that supports both hardware and subscriptions, and so we had to do this headless. We, full transparency, started trying to do this Headful, and we ran into problems where we just didn't have enough flexibility and control within Stencil, which is BigCommerce's Headful templating language, to be able to decide, like, should a product have a subscription, and what if a user already has a subscription? Can we hide that from them so that they don't buy 2 subscriptions? We just didn't have that level of flexibility by going Headful. So in a headless world, we have full control. We can call our own backend APIs. If someone is a logged-in user, we can find out, hey, they already have a subscription, and we can just hide that choose a plan section. So how does that work in terms of making a subscription in the backend? It's literally just the 2 new boxes that we have. So Tile Services is our backend API. They are responsible for all user data across Tile, whether that's the app or the website. We use ChargeBee as our recurring payment platform, but the only thing that has changed is within our order consumer, we just specify a couple of API requests, that fires off a webhook, and then Tile Services takes care of the rest. All of the data for plan IDs, subscription term, all of that lives inside our PIM, and everything just kind of cascades down through. So talking about developer experience, so everything is TypeScript. I am a huge TypeScript fan. I was an early adopter. And going back to what I was saying about our Contentful models, our Contentful models largely map to our TypeScript models. So if we have something that is a required field in Contentful, we can specify it in TypeScript as a known field. We know that field will exist. If we have something, again, take our hero banner example, it has a subtitle which may be optional, we can specify within TypeScript that that subtitle would be optional, and then TypeScript will force you to check that that subtitle exists before you try and call a method on it. So a developer isn't going to come in and try and call to uppercase on a subtitle which may or may not exist. And again, that starts to reduce the QA effort. It stops the site from 500ing if you try and call a method of undefined. We have a lot easier local debugging, so everything runs on a laptop. There is no Docker. There is no additional databases that we need to spin up. Everything runs nice and cleanly inside VS Code. You can set your own breakpoints. You can console log out, do whatever you want. The debugging process is a whole lot easier. And then, yeah, it took our old site roughly 30 minutes to deploy. By the time you publish a branch to actually it being live is about 30-odd minutes. Now we're down to about 8 to 10 minutes. And so again, just streamlining and simplifying that process. And we have no PHP, which is great. As a side benefit, we also refactored our build server. So we used to use Jenkins, which having the surname Jenkins is really confusing. Everything is now in GitHub Actions, which keeps everything in the same code base. And also, if you haven't used GitHub Actions, it comments back into your PR if something breaks. It's highly recommend it. So where are we? So honestly, we got somewhat delayed in launching. The project's kind of been in flight for a year or so, but we had to take a break. So holidays is our biggest time of year. So Q4, we sell 75, 80% of our market that time of year. So we had to take a break and fix some issues on our legacy website and fix some accessibility issues and add some features that the marketing team wanted. So our Australia storefront is due to go live in June. So we have spun up production infrastructure now. We're kind of in the final stages of building monitoring alerting, which happy to chat to anyone about monitoring alerting after. But we have a full switchover at the end of October. We have contracts that expire at the end of September that mean we really need to be off this infrastructure. But we're, like I say, we're pretty much ready to go. So going back to the start of why did we choose to replatform? So this is our new Lighthouse score. So we went from 34 up to 72, which is still not perfect. But one thing that is different between here and what will happen when we go live is that everything currently is server-side rendered. And so we have a staging environment that runs server-side rendered to make things easy for QA. If they make changes to content or product data, everything just reloads in real time. When we choose to put this platform live, again, one of the nice things at Netlify, we don't have to worry about swapping over to statically rendered pages. And so with those static rendered pages, we can pull all the content from Contentful or from BigCommerce at build time. Our build time may go up slightly, but that means that when someone is accessing our website, it's just statically rendered pages. The content is really fast. It's, again, on the high-performance edge, so a page will load way sooner than 1 second. And then, again, we're making use of all of the CMS tools. So within Contentful, we use their source set assets. And so all of that image optimization is already done for us. And that's me.